Hello, welcome to Helping You Soar, a sort of legal podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Berkman. I'm one of the founding partners and the chair of the Corporate and Securities Practice Group at Falcon Rappaport & Berkman. While having practiced for over 35 years, I continued to be impressed by the entrepreneurs and business leaders I've met as I've traveled the road as a corporate attorney and a business advisor. The focus of my conversations with business leaders is to explore commonalities as well as unique qualities that have been instrumental to their incredible levels of success. We want to talk to business leaders who are not only launching innovative products and services, but also approaching established businesses in new ways and creative ways. The goal of the podcast is to help educate early-stage founders, entrepreneurs, and companies at various stages by speaking to those who have not only achieved great success, but also thought leaders in the world of business. Thus, why I call this podcast a sort of legal podcast. Let me start with a story. I previously had on as a guest George Adams, who wrote a book called Create the Connection, 25 Surefire Strategies for Success in Leadership and Life. The book highlights the qualities endemic to effective leaders. In essence, the book explores what it is and what it takes to be a great leader in business, but also to achieve success in one's personal life. When he talks about leadership, it is not just about achieving great financial heights, but being a leader in one's company, being a good leader vis-a-vis your employees, and striving for a life well lived. The book talks about how the connections you make not only are important to being a successful entrepreneur, but just generally how to be a better person. Now recall another guest I had, Michael Gleisner, who is a serial entrepreneur and venture capitalist. When I served as his in-house general counsel, I watched Michael parlay his connections into achieving great success and personal success, and his success in business and life. As it happens, when I worked for Michael, I worked closely with one of the managing directors, a fellow by the name of Ewan. We became great friends, and many years later, when I and my partner started Falcon Rappaport & Berkman, my former colleague introduced me to today's guest, Jeff Streader. Over the years, Jeff Streader has not only become an extremely valued client of the firm, but I have the pleasure to be able to call him a friend. Why'd I tell this story? 2 reasons. On a simple level, it demonstrates the importance of connections. My old boss led me to meet my friend Ewan, who introduced me to today's guest, Jeff Streader. The second reason is because I think you will hear in today's discussion how, whether he realizes it or not, Jeff Streader exemplifies how the connections and relationships he has made not only lead to his success as a business person, but in his personal life. Before we get started, a disclaimer. I need to note that this podcast is meant for informational and entertainment purposes only. This is not legal advice. If you need legal assistance, please contact a lawyer. As I launch into our conversation, one important point, obviously my guest and I share the same first name. This can create a bit of confusion given the frequent emails and the video conferences we're on. So we call each other by our last names so that everyone we deal with understands who we're talking about. We don't do it because we're back in high school. We do it because it just makes the flow of the conversation much easier. So today, it's not a matter of disrespect. It's a matter of how we get going here. I will call him Streader, and he'll call me Berkman. Okay, so now time for my guest. I'm pleased to be able to sit down with Jeff Streader. Streader is the founder of Go Global Retail. I first met him when I worked with him on an acquisition of ModCloth, which was a corporate carve-out in 2020 from Walmart. Then in April 2021, Go Global was the sponsor of a transaction that involved the acquisition from Gap of Janie and Jack, a premier high-end children's brand. Streader is also the chairman of the board of Janie and Jack Holdings, which owns Janie and Jack, Brooms Milano, which is an Italian children's high-end clothing company, and most recently they acquired Hatch, a fashionable maternity wear and accessories brand. As I always say, this podcast starts with the first question that I know, but after that, I never know where it's going to end up. So with that, I want to welcome Jeff Streader.
Thank you, Berkman. Good to be here.
Okay, so let's start here. As I see it, Go Global and Janie and Jack Holdings are focused on acquiring brands, particularly underperforming companies with excellent brand name. Is that an accurate description?
It's an accurate description. We look for brands that either have not reached their full potential or they went on the rails.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about how you actually got into consumer brands. A little bit about your background, how you end up where you are today, but really why you focus on consumer brands.
So I lived here in the in the city, in New York City, in the 80s and 90s. And I worked in the consumer business, but really as a service provider with a multi-billion-dollar company, Oxford Industries, that was producing product, apparel, and accessories and footwear for the middle market, JCPenney, Eddie Bauer, Lands' End, and then moved on to the F Corporation, and then moved on to Kellwood Company. Along the way, always as a manufacturer, producer of product for branded companies. Along this journey, I recognized the importance of the brand as compared to being a service provider in the back that recognized the importance of the brand. And when a brand was acquired, at VF, we acquired the North Face. At VF, we acquired Vans. And you could see how the company was changing, building a portfolio of lifestyle brands. And I could see how the significance of the company, the relevance of who we were, and the valuation of the company increased through brand acquisition. And I thought to myself, this journey has to include brands. When Kellwood was acquired in a hostile takeover, an uninvited takeover in 2008 by Sun Capital, which is one of the investors on the New York Stock Exchange, I took the opportunity at that point to really focus on the next stage of my career to move into a branded company, Guess, the denim company. Guess is based in California and Los Angeles. I lived here in the city. My wife and I moved from Manhattan to Manhattan Beach to be a part of the Guess world. And the company Guess was all about brand. The founders of the company, the Marcianos, were brand makers. They understood the importance of brand, the messaging, the meeting, and listening to who their core demographic is. During the 3 years that I spent with Guess, the company, despite the fact the years of 2008, 9, 10, 11 was really difficult, there was a recession at that time, the company's revenue increased from 1.7 to 2.3 billion because they were brand makers and understood the significance of listening to their consumer and responding to that. This was all about a journey of, for me, a part of my experience and knowledge that I built is to listen to the customer and build a brand from there. So as my career moved on, looking at the significance of brand, it was always important for me to really focus on, is there a brand? What does the brand mean? And so that was a part of my journey.
So it sounds like to me what part of the focus is when you're out, looking for opportunities is about lifestyle, right? These brands are either in some cases I talked about earlier about they're underperforming. They're out there already. Something happened along the way. They lost their way in some capacity, whether it's operationally or some other event has occurred. But it's the brand is still a lifestyle brand ultimately that you really want to focus on.
A lifestyle brand that's relevant. So we have different ways of measuring a brand. Many brands have fallen into, they've reached their peak. They were unable to reinvent themselves. They were unable to evolve. And what they did was they reached the summit and they came over the top and they started to fail. Their revenue was in decline. They lost their customer base. We look for brands that are still relevant. With ModCloth, which we acquired from Walmart, which was part of the incubator program when they invested into half a dozen different brands, they were trying to learn more about the consumer business. And they were looking at what ModCloth, which was a vintage women's apparel company, the way that they engaged with their customers. And it was a web-only, a digitally native brand. With Janie and Jack, the company bounced around a little bit. It was a part of Bain, a part of Gymboree Corporation, and it was a multi-billion-dollar company. And then the Gap acquired it just a couple of years prior. But then COVID came about in 2020. And Janie and Jack was $150 million when we acquired the company. It was small. It was not strategic. It wasn't given the love. It's not that they lost their way. They maintained a premium position in the marketplace, but the brand was not strategic. And we were able to acquire this in an opportunity coming out of COVID.
So let's go back a little bit on ModCloth, because originally when we were talking about this a few minutes ago before we were going to get into having this conversation, I worked with you on the ModCloth transaction. I was questioning whether I should even mention it because obviously, it had a short life and something happened along the way. And I'll never forget because I remember shortly after ModCloth was acquired, COVID came. Well, and I thought to myself, we literally had just closed this transaction and now what?
So we acquired the company in late January of 2020. I had just returned from China. I was in China the second week of January of 2020. It was really to raise some capital for the transaction. And when traveling there, which is interesting, it may not be business related, but I'm traveling, meeting with some of the largest consumer companies in Shanghai. And I said, do you know what's going on in this city that begins with the W? And nobody mentioned Wuhan. People were mentioning Wenzhou. And I says, no, it's not Wenzhou, because there's something going on here. This was before China either acknowledged it, recognized it, but I went there. It came back like around the 18th and 19th, and we closed just a week later. And it was super interesting for us because for us, Go Global, as our first transaction, and all of us on the Go Global team had been involved in not only big corporate America leadership roles, but in private equity. But this was our first transaction, acquiring it from Walmart. And it was advantageous for us because Walmart was now moving on from these 5 incubator brands that they were measuring in the marketplace. And we acquired the company, and 5 weeks later, on Friday, March 13th, we announced to the business that we were closing both offices, an office in Pittsburgh, an office in Los Angeles. Everybody went remote. Our warehouse was kind of a mess because this is when it was really kicking up. The product was women's vintage dresses. As you know, in March, April, May, June of 2020, nobody was going out. And therefore, as people hibernated, stayed inside, Uber Eats coming in, everybody's wearing loungewear. Everybody's staying at home casual. We weren't selling product. We did not furlough our people. We had to make some serious adjustments and ended up selling the business 15 months later. But it was a learning experience for me of how to manage a business during a global pandemic. But it also was the backdrop for us for transaction number 2.
Yeah, which is great because that's a transition I want to make, right? It's amazing to talk to a business leader who's willing to say, well, look, we had this transaction, something happened, we did the best we could, but we learned from it, right? And so when you went in and you launched into considering the acquisition of Janie and Jack from the Gap, how'd you pull that off? I mean, you were an unlikely suitor, not well known in the industry, certainly. I mean, you personally may have been, but not Go Global as a a successful acquirer of brands at that point. How did you pull that off?
So it was super interesting. There were 2 brands in the Gap portfolio that were considered non-strategic. One of them was a luxury multi-brand reseller called Intermix, and the second one was Janie and Jack. Both of these are smaller brands. The Gap portfolio, it consists of Gap, Banana Republic, Old Navy, and Athleta are the 4 brands. So the board had given a mandate to the CEO and had suggested that they offload or divest of these 2 brands. And we were fortunate enough to get into a very tightly shopped process. And there were only a few people that were invited in, and we were able to come in for this process, and we tried to focus on not widely shopped transactions where there's just a few interested strategic or financial buyers, and we were able to get in on this. Because we're from industry, because we understand e-commerce, because we understand retail stores and of our operational background, we were led into the process, and we were able to reach the valuation that the Gap was deemed acceptable, a fair valuation, which we paid for the company. Janie and Jack and the Gap was just coming out of COVID. Most of their stores were closed and just starting to open up. And we knew there was an opportunity for us to return to market, a go-to-market strategy, but a return to market by looking at the retail footprint and looking at the investments that needed to be made. And this was the significant part here, because who we were competing against were largely financial sponsors, people that didn't have necessarily the knowledge to stand it up, because what we had to do is they were running on the Gap's business systems, meaning their enterprise solution. And all of this supporting 30 systems were Gap systems. We had to cut over in 5 months, which included an RFP, going to marketplace, selecting systems, and standing up our own systems, which we did. So it's with the Go Global management team, which we have, which all go in as operators, and then working with the executive leadership team of Janie and Jack. In 5 months, we were a standalone company. The TSA was over, which you negotiated, and we were up and running. So, and that was the beginning of Janie and Jack as an independent company, which had not happened in many, many years, many, many years.
Yeah, it's super interesting because I think one thing I've sort of seen along the way in the multiple transactions and dealings we've had is there's something about the way you, and I certainly the management team, but certainly the way you approach these transactions, there's a style about it. I think part of that is that obviously what the target company is and where you see this is going to fit into the ultimate strategic goals and structure. But I also think it's a little bit about how you connect with people. So at the beginning of this intro to today's episode, I talked a lot about connections and connections to people, and both on a personal level in terms of who you meet, who you get introduced to, but also within the company. So how do you see that sort of come through in the connections, between with employees, with the management, with the consumer, with the customers, et cetera? How's that connection made, you think?
Well, it's companies which I often value a company on brand and the intellectual property in the product, but there's an important component there, and it's the people. And it's really to lean into the company, understand the people that are there. Are they excited about a journey of growth, a journey of change, a journey of learning? And it's really to treat them with the same respect, whether it's the youngest person that's in their 20s that's in the company and learning and starving for knowledge, or whether it's somebody that's in their 50s, has been in the company for a long time and has been a part of the success on the earlier chapters. It's acknowledging these people, working with them, and providing them the strategic roadmap, the blueprint of where we're going. Here's how we're going to execute it. Here's where we're going. Here's what we expect you to be able to contribute. Oh, and by the way, if there's anything that you see is not working, let's talk about it because we value your input. It's not a mandate, and I should state this as, although we are private equity investors, we're from an industry. We understand the heartbeat and the pulse of the brand, but we make mistakes all the time too. And we're not going to go inside and strip out cost and say, how many people do you have? Even though it's important to understand whether they're bloated and have too many people in certain areas, it's about understanding the potential for the brand and where the brand could grow. And so we look to people inside the company to be a part of our journey while we modify, enhance, and bring our experiences into the company. And it's working.
Yeah, I think that's something that gets lost with a lot of business leaders. I mean, that part of the purpose of this podcast is really to teach young entrepreneurs what they could do better, or how they can learn from successful people who are leaders in industries. And in particular, I think that they lose sight of understanding that there's many people within the structure. And so, the store manager or the person on the floor who's dealing with things all day long and directly dealing with the customer has a different view necessarily than you when you're thinking more strategically or with the management team strategically. We have to understand every aspect of the business, which is something I think, young business people who are starting up miss. So let's turn to Hatch, which was a recent acquisition. It's a premier fashionable maternity wear. And obviously, there's a connection there with respect to how, sort of the that would fold in with Janie and Jack in terms of children's brand, and now before that you have the maternity wear. But what is it that attracted you and the management team at Hatch?
So Hatch was an interesting acquisition, as was Janie and Jack. And I should state that we had not set out to become an acquirer of kidswear brands. And I don't have a kidswear background, but it's a brand, and there's an end consumer, a demographic here. And the Janie and Jack demographic is ages 2 to 8, maybe 2 to 12. And it's a premium product. It's priced premium. We don't compete in the value or middle marketplace. And with our 120 stores, we're able to give that experience to our customers that visit our stores, which we have a store on the Upper East Side here. We have a store down in Brookfield Place, downtown, which is a flagship store, 2,500 square feet. But along the way, we're always looking to add additional brands that could be creative and not competing or cannibalizing to the Janie and Jack business. Last summer, a friend of mine at a reputable firm, Guggenheim, reached out to me and said, Jeff, there is an opportunity here to acquire a premium brand, a premium maternity brand called Hatch. I knew of the maternity space, because back in 2018, we were looking at destination maternity, and they had Pea in the Pod as a part of their portfolio, was aware of that space, but they're more middle market and down market in terms of the customer facing focus. And Hatch, which I knew of the brand Hatch, but wasn't aware of the products. It's been a few years since my wife and I had children, is that Hatch was positioned in a premium placement. So we did our research. We looked at the brand. They're at the top of the good, better, best pricing channels. And we decided to sign the non-disclosure agreement and proceeded to due diligence. When looking at this, what became evident to us is, number one, the brand profile was still very relevant. Number two, the business was not being run optimally. There were opportunities in the supply chain and technology in the back office to, I'll say, right-size the business, but also operate in a streamlined process workflow between the different departments. And number three, it wasn't being funded. The owners at that time were managing the business, but not for growth. So we looked at the opportunity to acquire this. And this is where the most important element comes in, is that the Hatch demographic, denim jeans sell for $200. Their intimates, their leggings are on the high side of the pricing structure. And they have this amazing product, which was a belly boil, which is a woman applies early in her pregnancy and then postpartum in the 4th and 5th trimester, which helps the skin and for recovery. And when looking at these products that they had, I thought, wow, these products are amazing. And they're also premium. But what we realized here, and this is with the help of the Janie and Jack executive team with Mo Begg and Parnell Eagle, who are co-presidents at Janie and Jack, that the data that's acquired by Hatch in the 2nd and 3rd trimester, the customer that's coming in, that mom that's buying the belly oil and he's paying $200 for a pair of denim jeans that she's going to wear 5 or 6 times, she's a premium mom. And that mom is probably the Janie and Jack mom who will wear premium products for special occasion and all of the product that we have. And so the acquisition of this became a data-driven acquisition where we're able to bring all of the information, whether she shops in the Hatch stores, there's a store on Bleecker Street, there's a store on the Upper East Side, or shops online, but we're able to harvest that data in a combined CDP, a customer data platform, where we keep all of our customer data from our stores, from our website, from social, to build a profile. And we're able to bring this data together more specifically. So Hatch and Janie and Jack data is combined, and it allows us to be more precise in understanding our customers. So we're not spamming people, but we're giving them unique messages based upon their profile. This is the strategic acquisition behind Hatch to come into Janie and Jack, not just because we're going to run the business better, which we are. It's because of the data, the power of data. And this is a whole new playbook here, Bergman.
What's interesting is if you think back at the acquisition of Janie and Jack, and Gap had all these different brands, and how they never were able to, I guess, really fit it into their strategic plan or what happened there. Hatch as a premium brand lost its way sort of as well, right? Like this is again the focus of what is it, do you think, ultimately where companies lose their way in not focusing on what made the brand originally successful?
I think what it comes down to is brands that listen to their customer, brands that will adjust to their customer, are the brands that are successful. Here's what you need, here's what you want, and here's what you're going to buy. If that's the path you're taking, there's at some point, your customer's going to say, I'm tired of you telling me, but I'm going to go somewhere else. And so what I think we understand is we're listening to our customers. And how do you listen? What doesn't sell? What only sells on markdown? Where does she go if she's not buying a product from us? Not saying you need to lose your positioning. We are not taking Hatch middle market. We are not taking Janie and Jack middle market. We want to be good, better, best. We want to be premium, but we're listening to our customer. And I think that the important thing is to listen to your customer and to make design right, trend right, quality products for your core demographic. And that's what we're doing. And we're executing on that.
Listening is such an important thing, right? Obviously, you talk about listening to your customer. I was in a transition to a point, something about, in terms of when I've seen you involved in all these deals and the negotiations. I think what a lot of acquirers, a lot of business people in the acquisition space, a lot of their advisors fail to do is they fail to listen to the other side. They fail to listen to what is necessarily the pain point, where there's a room for negotiation. It's less confrontational. Your style is not confrontational at all. It's quite the opposite. It puts people at ease. But I think that's the key point, right? It's listening along those spectrum, whether it's listening to the people who work with you, listening to the executive team, listening to your customer, or when you're out doing an acquisition, listening to the brand that you're going to acquire, right? And what their pain point is and how you feel you could step in and address that, right?
I think it's a better path. It was a tough return for me. I lived here in New York for almost 20 years, and I loved it. And there's no city in the world like New York. Now, I live in Los Angeles. It's a little different in LA right now. But I have to tell you, after not living here and not working here for a few years now, because we've been out on the West Coast for 15, 16 years, when the acquisition of Hatch came in and I had to negotiate, whether it was with banks, whether it was with creditors, whether it was the sellers of the company, I forgot the style of here. And my style, maybe I got a little soft, maybe because I believe we can both win, and there's a way that we could both win and walk out of the room as heroes. Preferred style here is mano a mano when I win and you lose. But we've been able to maintain that where we can both walk out winners. And that's the style that we will continue to carry in the next acquisitions that we're doing. And we're in several processes right now. I think there's a way where both could win. I could find a valuation and an acquisition price that is advantageous for us, a fair price, acquisition cost, where the IRR, the return on capital, return on investment to my investors, there's a clear path, they could see it, and you, the seller, are not being fleeced.
I learned a long time ago when I was young from actually my father, who told me about, who was a lawyer, and he told me about negotiating. And he always said that, if both parties walk away feel like the other one didn't rip them off, if they felt like they got something, not everything, but they got something, later on, they was much better off. You didn't get the nitpicking at the purchase agreement to figure out if there's some way they could get back at them, or, complaining about the transaction or feeling disgruntled. That everybody has to recognize they got to give something in the negotiation, which I think is often lost. Let's change the focus a little bit. What motivates you in the morning? When do you get up? I know, I was give you a hard time. I'll call you and say, what are you on the volleyball, playing beach volleyball this morning? But, so I'll have a little bit about the routine, because I think it's interesting to see how, business people are not just about their business. That, at least the ones that I think that have been able to make that balance. There's a life behind the business.
So despite the fact that our portfolio is largely domiciled here in the States with Janie and Jack and Hatch, and there is the company in Milan, is that we are Go Global is a international company. We're global. So my day is unique, is that the processes that we're in right now of brand acquisition, half of them are in the States, half of them are outside. We're in several processes in Europe right now. We love European brands, Western European brands that we would acquire for either our portfolio, which is the Janie and Jack group, or for Go Global, which is a separate entity. So there's two different, I'll call them acquisition centers. But my day starts early on the West Coast. I'm in LA time. My day starts at 6 and it starts in Europe. And it's different all the time. Sometimes acquisition, sometimes it's management of Brooms Milano, which is a premium kidswear company that we have in Italy right now. And then my day ends in Asia after working the US normal hours from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And that's US and everything that's happening here in the States. Then we have investors and we have partners that are in Tokyo, in Shanghai, in Hong Kong, and my nights are there. But during the week, I run hard. On the weekend, on Saturday, I shut it down and I go to the beach every Saturday.
Yeah, I think that running hard is why, we often talk about sports, right? I know you love sports, right?
World champion.
That's right, and we were going to get to that in a little bit. But so I think that, to some degree, there's something to be learned, right, from sports, from how, working hard That's obvious. Working hard gets you somewhere, but it's more than just working hard, right? It's the commitment. It's the buying into the lifestyle. I mean, it's what makes you the true athlete who's you can be born with it, right? You can have an innate ability, a physical capability. You can be athletic, but it takes them to the next level. It's something different, right?
It is. It's drive and determination, which I have. It's surrounding myself on my team with people that have the same drive, determination, not just functional experience in different areas, but are driven and can run hard. But also, and this is the tough part about it, is in the companies that we acquire, there's people on the executive team that perhaps are solid in their own right, but aren't right for the new team, the future of where we're going. And I'll point to sports in this instance, whether it's one of your sports teams that you like or one of mine, sometimes you have to trade people out. You have to trade out the quarterback. The Jets just signed Justin Fields yesterday. I have a quarterback. I have Jalen Hurts. But you trade out these players, you move in new players, you put together your team, and you put together your team that you think would not only be able to compete, but will be able to excel next year. I've had to make those adjustments not only at Go Global, I've taken people out, I've added people in, and it's just to make us stronger. But in the acquisition companies, we've made changes where people left the company and they were solid people in their own right, but people that came in with a different skill set, a different drive, a different step, and they come in, especially as the world changes with artificial intelligence, with regenerative AI, with what we're doing in digital. We spent $20 million in technology at Janie and Jack. Our technology stack is top 10% of the industry, the consumer industry. We're built for prime time. You need to have executives on your team that are digitally driven leaders. And I've added those to the team. Janie and Jack is fired up. We're ready to go. So it's making those changes to your team as if it was a sports team.
Yeah, was it? Really interesting analogy. So a couple more questions and then we'll wrap it up. Along the way, what do you think has surprised you most about sort of the M&A process?
Probably the thing that's surprised me the most is that what's presented in the beginning of the process is we're often not the way that it really is. And the seller, whether it's a family or it's a corporation or it's a private equity sponsor, they're not, I'm going to say, malicious in presenting the financials and the operational data. It's just they don't see what's coming or what the real problems are. And more often than not, the pretty picture that we receive, the management deck, has some really frothy, and here's what we did, and here's what's happening in the next year or two. And it looks good, but in diligence and understanding the path, the playbook, the people, the team, you realize that that's not going to work. And so fortunately for us, we're able to uncover that. Unfortunately, what that means is throughout the due diligence and throughout the acquisition process, our indication in the beginning, which is based upon data provided to us from the sponsor, usually is in decline after that because that's not reality. The most difficult thing is the excitement that we get and then finding out that that's not really it. And we don't reduce the price or the valuation because it's a bait and switch. It's not that at all. It's just that what you stated is not true.
Yeah, so sellers have to learn a little bit about, particularly founder sellers, have to learn more about being realistic, right? About the expectations, particularly when they're in a transaction like you focus on underperforming companies or, with premier brands, but they're still underperforming at that time.
We had a company, I just have to tell you, we had a company last year where we told the owners of the brand where they were going to end the year 6-7 months before the end of the year, and we dropped our valuation. And they said, "No, you're wrong." And I says, "No, here's where you're going to end up." And I'm thinking, we know your business really well. And we put our pencils down, we paused, we went back in at the end of the year, and they ended almost spot on. And this is kudos to Deborah Gajulu and Christian Foyer, who recognized this. And it's the diligence and understanding as industry leaders. We're from corporate. We see it coming.
All right. So when I started the talking to you in my introduction about connections, right? So, the connections that you made along the way and the importance. And I had mentioned earlier how I met you through Ewan, Ewan Chow, yeah. Ewan and I worked together with my old boss when I was in house, and just, it's an amazing circle of connections. And so, I have to say that the result of that and building those relationships over the years as business people, as advisors, whatever, is just, kind of led us to where we are today. So, those connections are extremely important. And I would say in that a comment, if you're a business person, if you're building a company, if you're a founder, if you're a father, your employee, maintaining those connections, not burning bridges, figuring out how you can work together, both in your business life and in your personal life.
Yeah, and it's been fantastic. And the team of people, which includes you and Chris Schreiber and Deborah Gazzolo and Christian Foyer and a whole bunch of others in Europe and Asia, here in the States, are really focused on understanding the brand, the potential for the brand to return to where it was or to unlock with the potential of where the brand can grow. And the team is amazing. And we're in a half a dozen processes right now, and they dive in, look at the brand, look at its social footprint, look at its successes and its missteps that we have. And we're actually pretty solid for a small acquisition company.
Yeah. All right. So I have one last question.
Yeah.
So I was reading the article the other day. I think the NFL, they're thinking of trying to get rid of the tush push, right? What's that going to do to the Eagles? Is that going to, besides Buffalo, is that going to destroy the Eagles? Or you think another Super Bowl's in mind?
No, listen, I've been fortunate enough to have 2 Super Bowl wins in the last 7 years. The tush push is just one play. When you have a center and my offensive line, if you watched the Super Bowl, which you did, and you looked at our offensive line, which is 360 pounds average across, versus the Kansas City Chiefs or other teams, we're a big offensive line. We're meant for a push. And then you have a quarterback that squats like 800 pounds. So the combination of those two things, it's an offensive weapon. And other teams have different offensive weapons. The tush push will not be banned, and the Eagles will continue to use it. Will we win another Super Bowl? It's hard to get back, Bert. It really is. I doubt it, but
it would be great. All right. Well, with that, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down. There's a lot of lessons to be learned here for people listening. And, it's really a pleasure to work with you. Like I said earlier on, I consider you not just a valued, client to this firm, but also a friend. And so thanks for taking the time, and all the pleasures of working together as go global and Janie, Jack, and the world continue to, become more and more successful. So thank you, Jeff.
Great to be here, Berkman. Thank you. See you.
To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We hope you found today's discussion enlightening and informative. If you have any questions about the topics we covered today, or if you'd like to learn more about our firm, please don't hesitate to contact us at info@frblaw.com. Falcon Rappaport & Berkman is a full-service business law firm with multiple offices across New York, California, and Florida. Our breadth of services offers a full range of legal practices, and our team works collaboratively to simplify complex and interdisciplinary matters. FRB differentiates itself by approaching matters with a level of depth and variety of skills unmatched by typical advisors, following through on a firm-wide commitment to excellence in service, offering access to thought leaders in numerous areas of professional practice, and engaging in a partnership with clients to develop and achieve legal, business, and personal objectives. Visit us at frblaw.com to learn more. We hope the insights today will indeed help your business soar. Until next time, take care.